You got to see what's happening. They all want to come back to Michigan and build cars again. You know why? Because of our tax and tariff policy.
The North American auto industry, the big three, are navigating a new era as they deal with the impact of President Trump's tariffs.
Now, General Motors and Stellantis are already feeling the impacts, and now we're waiting to hear from Ford. GM says its second quarter profits fell by $1 billion. Stellantis says it lost $2.7 billion in the first half of the year, partially due to tariffs.
The U.S. job market looks increasingly fragile, especially after the latest numbers that just came out. So this report just moments ago shows the U.S. economy added 22,000 jobs in August. That is very low. It's also just a fraction of the 77,000 jobs that had been expected. The unemployment rate went up to 4.3% from 4.2%. That was expected, but this is notable because this is the highest unemployment rate since October of 2021.
5 big corporations are leaving America. 100,000 jobs gone. 8 states in crisis. That headline has been shared thousands of times in recent weeks. It sounds alarming. It sounds like a turning point for the U.S. economy. But is it real? Or is it another viral claim built on half-truths? Here's what we know. In August 2025, companies in the United States announced 85 to 979 job cuts. That's a 39% jump from July, the worst August for layoffs since 2020. Year to date, nearly 892,000 jobs have been cut on paper, according to Challenger, Gray & Christmas. At the same time, the official jobs report shows unemployment creeping up to 4.3%, while hiring slowed to just 22,000 new jobs. These are serious numbers, but they don't quite match the viral headline. So in this video, we're going to separate fact from rumor. We'll break down the real data, the industries under stress, and the states seeing the biggest jumps in layoffs. And then we'll connect the dots to the trade fight, because the new Trump tariffs 2025 could be the hidden factor shaping this story. The headlines may say 5 corporations left America. The truth is more complex, more nuanced, and more important for anyone watching the economy today. Number 1, Pfizer. When we talk about job losses in America in 2025, one of the most striking examples comes from the pharmaceutical industry. And at the center of that story is Pfizer. Pfizer was one of the biggest winners during the COVID-19 pandemic. Its vaccine, combined with treatments like Paxlovid, delivered record-breaking revenues in 2021 and 2022. But by 2025, demand for those products has fallen sharply. The United States no longer buys doses in bulk, global demand has normalized, and government subsidies have been scaled back. That leaves Pfizer with a much smaller revenue stream compared to the peak years. And companies almost always respond to shrinking sales in the same way. They cut costs. In July and August of 2025, Pfizer announced thousands of job cuts worldwide, with a significant share in the United States. According to reports cited by Challenger, Gray & Christmas, the pharmaceutical sector was among the leaders in announced layoffs this summer. For Pfizer, these cuts have hit research and development teams, manufacturing plants, and even administrative staff. The company has closed or downsized facilities in states like Michigan and New Jersey, regions that have long been tied to pharmaceutical production. So what does this mean for workers? For older employees in labs or manufacturing, it means early retirement packages or forced exits. For younger staff, it often means relocation or scrambling to find work in a shrinking industry segment. And remember, these are high-paying jobs. Pharmaceutical positions typically pay well above the national average with strong benefits. So when they disappear, the local economies feel the pain, not just the workers. Restaurants near plants lose customers. Contractors who supply materials lose business. Even local tax revenues take a hit. Now it's important to note, Pfizer is not collapsing. It remains a global giant with billions in annual sales. But the shift from pandemic boom to post-pandemic normal has forced a painful adjustment. The company is betting on new cancer drugs and treatments for rare diseases to drive the next wave of growth. Still, those projects take years to develop, while the job cuts are immediate. And here's where the broader picture matters. Pfizer's layoffs are not happening in isolation. They are part of the nearly 86,000 job cuts announced in August across the U.S. economy. And they raise an important question. How much of this is simply corporate restructuring and how much is connected to trade policy, to rising costs, and to the uncertainty around tariffs? For pharmaceuticals, tariffs don't play as direct a role as in retail or autos. But higher inflation, tighter capital markets, and political pressure on drug prices all contribute to a difficult environment. So when you hear the headline that 5 corporations are leaving America, Pfizer is often lumped into that story. But the reality is different. Pfizer is not leaving America. It is restructuring inside America, cutting thousands of jobs to match lower sales. And that's a very different story than saying goodbye. This is the first piece of the puzzle, and it shows why we need to look carefully at each corporation named in the rumor. Number 2, Citigroup. If Pfizer shows us what happens when demand for products falls, Citigroup shows us what happens when a global bank tries to reinvent itself. For years, Citigroup has been under pressure to simplify its sprawling structure. It operates in more than 90 countries, with layers of managers, overlapping divisions, and high compliance costs. Back in late 2023, Citi launched a massive restructuring plan known internally as Project Bora Bora. That plan carried into 2024 and 2025, and by now it has reshaped nearly every part of the bank. In January of this year, Citi confirmed it would reduce its global workforce by about 20,000 jobs over 2 years. And in 2025, the cuts began to bite in the United States. Thousands of positions have already been eliminated, many in technology, middle management, and back office support. According to Challenger, Gray & Christmas, the financial sector has been one of the top contributors to announced layoffs this year. Citigroup is right at the center of that story. So why now? Part of the reason is profit pressure. Higher interest rates, weaker trading revenue, and rising costs of compliance with U.S. and international regulators have squeezed margins. Another reason is competition. Rivals like JP Morgan Chase and Bank of America have invested heavily in technology, automation, and artificial intelligence. Citigroup, in contrast, had to catch up. And catching up often means cutting staff to fund new investments. In 2025, Citi merged several business lines, collapsed management layers, and sold off some non-core operations. The result, tens of thousands of jobs worldwide are gone or about to go, and a large share of those cuts are hitting American workers. New York and New Jersey, where Citigroup has large offices, have been especially affected. For the local economy, that means fewer commuters, less spending in downtown areas, and real estate pressures on office space. For employees, it means uncertainty. Workers in their 50s who thought they had a stable career suddenly face early retirement or the daunting task of reskilling. Younger employees who might have expected decades at one of America's largest banks are now competing for fewer jobs in finance. And this comes at a time when the financial sector as a whole is tightening its belt. Now, to be clear, Citigroup is not leaving the United States. It remains headquartered in New York, and it remains one of the big 4 U.S. banks. But like Pfizer, it is shrinking its footprint, cutting thousands of jobs to fit a new strategy. And here's where the bigger question arises. How much of this is internal restructuring, and how much is linked to the policy environment, especially trade and tariffs? Banks are not directly exposed to tariffs the way manufacturers or retailers are, but they are indirectly affected. When tariffs increase costs for businesses, when global trade slows, banks see lower transaction volumes, less financing activity, and more risk in lending. Citigroup's leadership has acknowledged that global uncertainty, including U.S. trade disputes, adds to the pressure they face. So once again, the rumor of 5 corporations leaving America is misleading. Citigroup is not leaving. It is cutting back, trimming down, and trying to survive in a tougher financial environment. And those cuts are real. Thousands of American workers, many of them in white-collar finance jobs, have lost positions in 2025. This is the second piece of the puzzle. It shows us that behind the headlines, what we really see is restructuring, not an exodus. Number 3, Meta. If Pfizer reflects the challenges of post-pandemic medicine, and Citigroup shows the struggles of global banking, then Meta gives us a window into how technology companies are reshaping themselves in 2025. Meta, the parent company of Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp, has spent years chasing growth in 2 directions: artificial intelligence and the metaverse. That dual strategy has come at a cost. In 2023 and 2024, Meta cut more than 20,000 jobs worldwide across engineering, recruiting, and business operations. In 2025, the layoffs have continued, though on a smaller but still significant scale. According to reports compiled by Challenger, Gray, and Christmas, the technology sector remains among the largest contributors to job cuts in the United States this year. And Meta is a key part of that. So what is happening inside the company? First, Meta is consolidating teams. Projects in augmented reality and virtual reality, once scattered across different divisions, are being pulled together under Reality Labs. That reorganization has led to duplicate roles being eliminated. Second, the company is automating more functions. AI systems are being used to handle tasks in customer support, content moderation, and even ad targeting, jobs that once required human staff. Third, Meta is rebalancing its workforce. It is hiring aggressively in some areas, especially generative AI and computing infrastructure, while cutting deeply in others. For example, in California's Bay Area and in Washington State, hundreds of employees tied to legacy projects have lost jobs. These are not factory jobs. They are high-skilled, white-collar positions with six-figure salaries. When those disappear, the ripple effects hit the housing market, local businesses, and even city tax revenues. For communities built around tech campuses, a wave of layoffs can feel like a sudden chill in what was once a booming local economy. Now, what about the larger story we've been following? The idea of corporations leaving America. Meta is not leaving the United States. It remains firmly headquartered in Menlo Park, California, but it is reshaping its footprint inside America. Data centers are being expanded in some states, while office space is being reduced in others. The company is moving away from sprawling staff structures and toward leaner, AI-driven operations. And there's another layer, trade policy. Technology companies depend heavily on global supply chains, from servers to semiconductors. The new tariffs announced in 2025 increase the cost of certain imported components. That raises expenses for Meta, just as it tries to invest billions in new infrastructure. So while Meta's layoffs are driven primarily by internal restructuring and the shift to AI, tariffs add another financial burden. When margins tighten, job cuts often follow. For workers, the experience is painful. Engineers who once felt secure at a trillion-dollar tech giant suddenly face pink slips. Contractors in content moderation, many of them working remotely across different states, have seen contracts terminated. And younger employees who dreamed of building a long career at Meta now face a far more uncertain future. The bottom line is this: Meta is not saying goodbye to America. It is cutting thousands of jobs in America while doubling down on the projects it believes will define the future. It is a transformation, one that shows both the promise and the cost of technology in 2025. And for our story, it is the third example of why the viral headline about 5 corporations leaving doesn't hold up to the facts. Number 4, Amazon. If Meta's story is about technology reshaping white-collar work, Amazon's story is about the backbone of American retail and logistics. Amazon is one of the largest employers in the United States, with more than 1 million workers across warehouses, delivery networks, and offices. And when Amazon adjusts its workforce, the impact is felt far beyond Silicon Valley or Wall Street. In 2025, Amazon has been closing or consolidating warehouses in several states. Reports show reductions in states like Kentucky, Ohio, and California, areas where Amazon once expanded rapidly during the e-commerce boom. According to Challenger, Gray, and Christmas, the retail sector has been hit hard this year, with store closures, bankruptcies, and layoffs climbing to levels not seen since the pandemic. Amazon is not immune to these pressures. One reason is cost. The new tariffs announced in 2025 have raised the price of many imported goods. Electronics, household items, clothing, all staples of Amazon's retail business, now cost more to bring into the United States. The company faces a choice: absorb those higher costs, pass them to consumers, or cut expenses elsewhere. Often the result is a mix of all three, and job cuts are part of that mix. Another reason is efficiency. Amazon has invested heavily in robotics and automation inside its warehouses. Robotic arms now handle sorting and packaging. Algorithms plan delivery routes more efficiently than human dispatchers. And while these technologies increase productivity, they also reduce the need for human workers. For communities built around Amazon fulfillment centers, these job cuts can be devastating. In places like Kentucky, a single warehouse may employ thousands. When those jobs are reduced or eliminated, local economies feel an immediate shock. Restaurants, gas stations, and small businesses near those facilities lose customers. Housing markets soften, and families who relied on Amazon wages face uncertainty. It's also important to note that these are not always high-paying jobs. Many warehouse and delivery workers earn modest wages, with physically demanding schedules. But they provide stable employment in regions where alternatives may be limited. So when Amazon cuts, the human impact is widespread. Now let's connect this to the broader narrative. Amazon is not leaving America. In fact, it is expanding in some areas, such as cloud computing through Amazon Web Services. But it is rebalancing its U.S. footprint, closing certain warehouses, cutting staff in logistics, and automating wherever possible. This explains why Amazon shows up in conversations about major job losses in 2025, and tariffs amplify the challenge. When costs rise across supply chains, retail margins shrink. Retailers like Amazon then look harder for savings, and jobs are often the first line of adjustment. So once again, the viral claim about 5 corporations saying goodbye is misleading. Amazon is still deeply embedded in the U.S. economy, but the company is cutting thousands of jobs, especially in logistics and retail, as it adapts to tariffs, inflation, and a slower consumer environment. For our story, this is the 4th example. It highlights how a global powerhouse can still trim jobs at home, not because it is leaving, but because it is evolving. Number 5, Ford and General Motors. Our 5th and final stop takes us to one of the most iconic industries in America: automobiles. Ford and General Motors, 2 giants of Detroit, have been symbols of U.S. manufacturing for more than a century. But in 2025, even these giants are facing hard decisions. The shift to electric vehicles, the impact of global trade policies, and slower consumer demand are combining to reshape how these companies operate. Let's start with Ford. In the spring of 2025, Ford announced it would scale back production at several plants in Michigan and Kentucky. The reason: sales of electric vehicles, or EVs, did not grow as quickly as expected. Consumers facing high interest rates and rising car prices held back on new purchases. At the same time, tariffs on imported auto parts raised costs for U.S. production. Batteries, electronics, and specialized materials often come from overseas. With the Trump tariffs 2025 adding new fees, Ford faced a squeeze on its profit margins. The response cut shifts, slowed down production, and reduced staff. Now let's look at General Motors. GM has also been restructuring its operations. In 2025, it announced layoffs connected to its transition away from certain internal combustion models, while refocusing investment on electric trucks and SUVs. Like Ford, GM has faced higher costs for imported components. And like Ford, it has struggled with consumer hesitation toward EVs. In states like Michigan, Indiana, and Ohio, this has meant temporary plant shutdowns, early retirement offers, and thousands of job cuts. These are not just numbers. Auto jobs have long provided stable, middle-class wages with strong benefits. They supported families, schools, and local businesses for decades. So when Ford or GM trims production, the impact is immediate. Communities that depend on auto plants feel it in every diner, every hardware store, and every local budget. It's also worth noting that these cuts are not about leaving America. Both Ford and GM remain deeply rooted in U.S. soil, but they are restructuring, reducing jobs in some areas while betting on new technologies in others. And tariffs play a direct role here. Unlike banks or software companies, automakers are heavily exposed to global supply chains. When tariffs raise the price of imported parts, it directly affects the cost of building a car in Michigan or Ohio. That can mean fewer shifts, fewer workers, and less production. So once again, the viral headline that 5 corporations are leaving America distorts the truth. Ford and GM are not leaving. They are adjusting, painfully, to a changing market and to the pressures of trade policy. For workers, that means uncertainty. For the broader U.S. economy, it means one of the nation's oldest industries is being reshaped in real time. This is the fifth piece of our puzzle. And together, Pfizer, Citigroup, Meta, Amazon, and the Detroit automakers show us why America's job losses in 2025 are serious, complex, but very different from the rumor of corporations saying goodbye. We've just examined 5 major corporations: Pfizer, Citigroup, Meta, Amazon, and the automakers Ford and General Motors. Each of them is cutting jobs for different reasons. Pfizer is adjusting after the pandemic boom. Citigroup is restructuring its global bank. Meta is reshaping around artificial intelligence. Amazon is consolidating warehouses under pressure from tariffs and automation. And Ford and GM are slowing production as electric vehicle demand softens and imported parts become more expensive. The common thread is this: job losses are real, but they are not the same as 5 corporations leaving America. In August 2025 alone, U.S. companies announced 85,979 job cuts, the worst August since 2020. Year to date, nearly 900,000 positions have been marked for elimination, a 66% increase from last year. At the same time, unemployment has risen to 4.3%, while hiring slowed to just 22,000 jobs. This is the backdrop for the viral headline. But the truth is more nuanced. These corporations are not abandoning the United States. They are restructuring inside the United States, sometimes painfully, sometimes dramatically, but still very much here. And the policy environment matters. The Trump tariffs 2025, now facing review by the Supreme Court, are adding pressure to industries like retail and autos. If they remain in place, more cuts could follow. If they are overturned, some relief may come, but uncertainty will continue. So the lesson is clear: America's job market is changing. With USA tariffs 2025, that change could accelerate. And in times like these, it's essential to look at the facts, not just the headlines.